Hello and welcome everyone to this CVT Nuggets webinar. My name's Anthony and you are here for the How to Write an IT Resume webinar with Chris Ward and Shawn Powers. A couple quick reminders before I hand things over to Shawn and Chris. You guys can use the chat pod whenever you want to ask any questions, and Chris and Shawn will do their best to answer them at the end of the presentation. Also, another fun thing we're doing today is we're going to be handing out some CVT Nuggets swag to the first 3 questions that get answered. So look for an email after the webinar if your question gets answered. And lastly, I want to let you guys all know that we're going to be posting a recording of this webinar to our blog, blog.cvtnuggets.com. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand things over to Chris and Shawn. Take it away, guys.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to our webinar on how to write an IT resume, or CV, as a lot of the people in the UK and Europe, and probably I think everywhere outside of the US, they all use the term CV. Good to have you with us. We want to make sure that we give you tools on how you can get an interview, how you can make your resume or CV look better. Joining me out in the much colder regions of Michigan is Mr. Shawn Powers. How you doing, Shawn?
I'm doing pretty good. Interestingly, my part in this conversation is with very little experience. In fact, I don't even know CV. I'm not familiar with that term, so I may learn something as well. But I've gotten some jobs via my resumes and cover letters, possibly that I wasn't even qualified to get interviewed for. So I have some kind of on-the-ground insight, and we're excited to compare and contrast, like what should be done versus what I did or what I could have done better. Hopefully it'll help everybody be able to be successful with their resumes, cover letters, and ultimate job getting.
Absolutely, and I think that one of the things that many people want to know is there one way of doing this? So let's right up front. Shawn and I are going to both tell you, no, there's not just one way of putting a resume. However, there are some commonalities for successful resumes that I think we can give to you that will help increase your chances. So let's start with the positive. First off, what do you put on your resume and your CV, by the way, Shawn, is curriculum vitae. So it's Latin, they just say CV, basically resume. So first things first, basic information. You would be amazed at how I have received resumes, and I've talked to a friend of mine who is a human resource kind of headhunter, goes around and finds people for jobs, and she says that she gets resumes where they don't even have a contact piece of information. No email, no telephone number, just a mailing address.
It's funny you say that. I've been on some hiring committees, and while they do have their name on it, we've actually had to go to the envelope where they sent the, like back in the day of paper resumes, to get their return address to say, yes, we're interested, but who are you? To try to mail them back.
Absolutely. So first off, make sure you put your basic information, your name, telephone number, email. You want to make sure that you do that. Secondly, your skill set. What do you do well? That's what I call your skill set. Are you with Microsoft? Are you good with Cisco? Are you good with a whole bunch of things? Are you a database administrator, or are you more of a server infrastructure kind of a person? Are you a networking guy versus an operating system guy? Now, that doesn't mean that you can't, as we're going to see with Shawn's excellent skills on trying to get one job that you might not be qualified for, but what you can do is make sure that you put down what you do well. So that way people can say, wow, this person is top-notch at what they do, which then rolls into experience. Where did you do what you do well? I know I'm playing a little bit off of words here, and I know that might not always translate really well across all languages and cultures, but what we're saying is that with experience is if you are an experienced network administrator and you've worked for 3 or 4 companies, that's where you want to make sure that you put down where you've worked, and more importantly, as we're going to talk about a little bit later, make sure you say how you did what you did well. That's also where education comes in. How did you learn to do what you do well? Did you go to university? Did you go to community college? Some people say, well, I only went through high school or a community college. Hey, guess what? that's still legitimate. It shows that you are willing to learn and you're willing to learn new things, which is always good. And then finally, certification. Can you prove you can do things well? Certification, and that's a whole nother topic that Shawn and I could talk about. And the certification really, in a nutshell, in the world of IT, is really a way to prove that you at least know what the vendor wants you to know about the product.
I think that it's key to notice the difference between education and certification. When I look at a resume, or I know what somebody's done if they've gone to college and have gotten that degree. To me, a college degree shows that somebody's willing to put in the time, but a certification to me is actually proof that it amounted to something, at least in the world of IT. Anybody can go to college and get a degree in underwater basket weaving, and even that shows that you have the diligence to go through it, which is really important depending on the aspect of the job. But it's that certification, at least when I'm reading a resume, that says, okay, not only did they go through it, but they actually learned it and they can succeed in this topic.
Yeah, and that, which kind of brings us to something that I think is important as well, and that is what not to put on your resume and CV. The first thing, too much information. Now, I know Shawn's kind of shaking his head and smiling a little bit because he's going to show us one of his resumes. And by the way, Shawn, I appreciate you being willing to lay this out on the line and show us this. But what you find is that a lot of times we put too much information in the resume that instead we should be letting them want to ask us in the interview. In other words, if they really want to know a little bit more about what you did at acmecoffee.com, then you can give them that in the interview. But if you put something that's just a little small tidbit that makes them want more, for example, one of the things that I do is I let people know that I was a co-presenter with John Chambers of Cisco. He's the CEO of Cisco. I actually did, and this is years back, at Networkers, a presentation on e-learning. Now, was I on stage with John? No, I was actually doing a demonstration of virtual instructor-led training. So that, I wasn't on there, but I did present with him. Well, I'm not going to put that on the resume that, well, I really wasn't with John, and I really didn't actually, face-to-face, but people will ask me that, and it's a great story, and that's something I can say for the interview. Hobbies, Greek fraternities, or favorite movies. Shawn, maybe you can jump in here. If you're on a hiring committee, do you really care that woodworking is the best thing that they like to do in their spare time?
I will say that the only way that you would put things like that in there, again, is if they're pertinent to the specific job. And I'm sure that that's going to come across as we go on. And, rather than this is what my resume is, and then, spray and pray that it works for every situation. In some situations, maybe so. If I'm applying for a teaching position that may need me to do something with industrial arts or have a familiarity with that, if I'm going to be working with kids after school, hey, then maybe my woodworking would be appropriate. But if I'm applying for a database management position, which is what my resume you'll see in a few minutes is about, no, I'm not going to put woodworking, because that just makes it look like I'm trying to, oh, look what I can do. I can't do the job, but look what cool things I can do over here, and that's just counterintuitive.
Yeah, and that's the thing that you want to look out for. Fancy graphics or clip art. Now, again, just kind of to tie into what Shawn just said, are you applying for a graphic design position? Then, yeah, do an infographic resume. That really showcases what you can do. But for IT, for the most part, fancy graphics or clip art can actually be distracting. And it kind of, like Shawn almost hit on it, it's almost like you're trying to say, pay no attention to the man or woman that's applying for the job. Look, a pretty picture. Look, a nice piece of clip art. And especially if you use clip art.
Although I have to say there is a way, and you're going to see it in my resume, I think there is an appropriate way to draw people's attention to other aspects of your abilities, but more when we get to my resume. But yeah, generally, what's appropriate for the job?
Yeah. Now, we had it earlier in, one of the guys is asking, like, I'm 42, And do I put down that I went to high school? Because I went to the College of Hard Knocks, and I'm not sure. Well, one thing is you probably don't want to put every job you've ever had since you were 16, unless you're 18. Now, if you're 18 and you're, or just getting through college, and you've been a database administrator for your maybe local Boys and Girls Club because they needed somebody to do that, well then, hey, yeah, hey, I worked over here and I did this, and you can add those things. But if you're 42 years old, or if you're in your 30s, even in your late 20s, and you've got 6 to 10 jobs that you did, some of which are, I was working as a burger cooker at Wendy's when I was 16, don't put that on your resume because, again, that's not, as you're hearing us say, pertinent to most of the jobs that you are going to be applying for. Now, are you applying for the IT data administrator for McDonald's? Hey, you might want to put down that, hey, you used to work for McDonald's when you were younger, because that shows that you actually know the culture of that particular company.
What do you think, Chris? What if we put the resume up that we've been referring to and kind of pick it apart, show what's good, what's not good? Now, I should preface with, this is the actual resume that I sent in with the giant pink font, which I know looks ridiculous, but I have to preface this with, doggone it, I got the job. So even though there's a lot wrong with this resume, I got the job. So one of the things I wanted to point out, well, first of all, Chris, looking at it from a professional standpoint, what do you see that's probably questionable at first? And then maybe I'll talk about why I put it there, and other people can decide if it was good or not.
Right. Okay. So if I'm looking at this resume, now the two things is I actually know Shawn got the job, and secondly, I also know the type of position that he's applying for, so that might make it worthwhile doing this. But as somebody who's been in the industry for a long, long time, the fact that he has a 2-pager would almost automatically put it over to the, if I can't find the person I want in the 1-pagers, I'll go start looking at the 2-pagers. 2 pages of information. If you've got 1,000 people applying for a job, I'll just say this, if you've got 100 people applying for a job, I don't have the time nor the inclination to go through 2 pages. Now, if I can see what I want on the front page as I scan through it, I might be willing to turn it over. Or what a lot of people will cheat a little bit, they'll make it double-sided. And I think that that's something that that's good or bad, because sometimes people go, oh, 1 page, oh, it doesn't end. They won't turn it over and look at it. I've actually known people that never turn pages over and look at them. So you might want to watch out. The second thing is if you notice, he's got his objectives, he's got his skills, and then he puts the technical experience. Then he puts, because of the nature of this job, Cornerstone being a Christian university or a college, school actually, I do believe, he puts in leadership experience that deals with that. What I love about it, Shawn, is you split the experience. Because guess what? You can use that technical experience on your resume separately. And then you can maybe use your second page to go ahead and put the very specific type of job role that you're looking for. However, here's the deal. I would still try to make it to where you can fit and squeeze your certifications and or some of that information over onto the first page, if possible. Now, a lot of that might be just by using smaller bits of information about the jobs you have to make them want more.
An interesting note about this, you notice there's lots of space between the sections, and the margins are like, when you're in 8th grade and you want to make sure you have 2 full pages so you get the A. That's kind of what was going on here, and part of that is because I had no idea that a 1-page resume was the way to go. So what I was going for is, let's at least make both pages look full. I didn't want to have a page and a quarter. So I kind of smooshed the fonts and, and expanded the margins or whatever so that I would get 2 pages. You did mention one of the big things I wanted to point out, and that's on the second page, the Christian leadership experience. That wouldn't make any sense for most IT jobs, but like you said, it was a Christian university that I was applying for. And the other thing, I noticed somebody in the questions over there was asking, about, do I put my high school education, or what education should I put there? For me, you may notice nowhere in my small education part on the second page did I mention any degree, and that's because I didn't finish. I didn't get even an associate's degree at Michigan Tech. So I just mentioned some cool things that happened while I was there. The Michigan Tech Computer Club, yeah, that's what we called ourselves when we called companies and requested floppy disks so that we could pass them out, but it was just so we could get free floppy disks. But it was real. I put it on there. I think that if education isn't something that's going to help you get the position, don't even put that bullet point in there. I would rather have no education section and focus on the other things like certifications or technical experience rather than have an education section that looks sad. Even though I don't have a degree there, I left it in because I was applying to a university. It just seemed important to have something about my time at college there.
Yeah, and we've got some great questions and chats coming in. Don't worry, we'll talk a little bit about, like Juan asking a little bit about skill set, and I'm a jack of all trades, master of none, and also people asking about the applicant tracking system. So we'll cover that in the Q&A portion, so don't think we're ignoring you on that. So when you look at Shawn's resume, part of the way that he could clean a lot of this up, and he probably did a little bit, is this bad boy, otherwise known as the cover letter. The cover letter, and it depends. This, again, is more of a, if you're not using like an online-based system and putting things in. If you're doing I'm dropping this off, I'm putting it in the mail, I'm trying to do this. And see, we live in a world now where do you still use a hard copy? And my answer is always have a hard copy ready to go. And when you apply, let them know. If you'd like this as a hard copy, I'm willing to send it in. Also read the job description and the job posting to see if they're asking for it. A lot of times we start reading and we just fill out the online thing and then we go on our way. And if you would have scrolled a little bit more, you say, by the way, please also send me the file or attach a resume as a PDF. Or a little less on the Word docs, but PDFs pretty much are, the go-to for that. But look at this. You now have a letter, a cover letter, which can be the differentiator of somebody who has a resume that's maybe only one page, because now you can add a little bit, tell a little story. Here, I love how he says what he's currently doing and then what he has done in the past.
In fact, that second paragraph kind of references one of the questions we got, in that talking about being a jack of all trades, master of none. Rather than just say that kind of cliched term for somebody who can do everything, I described here, that the superintendent and I often joke, one, pointing out that I have a close working relationship with the superintendent of the district, and that my job responsibilities include anything that plugs in or takes batteries. Now, sure, it's kind of a cute anecdotal story, but at the same time, the reason I put that in there is that I wanted to tell the story that I can do everything involved with technology, like I said, from vision casting to unjamming printers. So while it came across as a neat little story, it was putting that information in there in a way that wasn't just a bullet point.
Now, with that, let's move on to something else that a lot of people, I know when we were starting to do this webinar on my Twitter chat areas, a lot of people had sent me some direct messages going, hey, are you going to talk about how you handle certification on a resume? Because that's kind of what we're doing. Well, here is one of my biggest recommendations. When you are certified, use the logo. It's amazing, even in an electronic format especially, it's really easy. You get the, like the MCP, the Microsoft Certified Professionals, you have a portal where you can go in and you can download, and actually you can create your own little business cards if you want with the logo. Cisco has the same thing. Most of them, you can see here, we got Cisco, Juniper, Microsoft. If there's some Linux stuff out there as well, make sure that you put that on, but use the logo, even if it's a little small logo next to the certification. It catches somebody's eye, which especially in those companies where they still do the hand by hand, or even on, online on their browser, if they're looking at your PDF and all of a sudden there's a little CCIE logo next to it, or I know, maybe just a CCNA or an MCSA. I know many of you are probably just starting off. Maybe some of you have those higher up certifications. Use the logo. But here is the caveat. Relate it to your experience. I use my MCSE in communications as a link specialist to do consultation with companies to install brand new unified communication solutions. Okay, well, guess what? Now I've got my logo, now I've got the cert, and I relate it to what it is that I do. That's why we make sure when we look at this, we look at it from a visual standpoint, but also on a how does this help me as the potential employer. That's nice that you have a certification, but what does it do for me? And as we find in our jobs, part of the reason why we do certification is we get I call it the Janet Jackson mentality. Now this is going to go over maybe some of your heads, but it's the what have you done for me lately mentality. And so that's why having the certifications and showing them can really be that extra spark that kind of fires up whoever it is that's taking a look at it. Now, does that mean that it's going to guarantee you an interview? No. But remember, the premise of this webinar that Shawn and I are doing is to give you some tips and tricks on how to take it to maybe the next level in your resume and CV writing, so that way you possibly can get that interview and not have to worry about it. Now, we mentioned the cover letter, and real quick, Shawn, just talk a little bit about your cover letters and how you use them when you're applying for jobs.
So this is where, you know, you always read that employers will look on social media and stuff to find out about potential employees before interviewing them, or especially before hiring them. Well, to be honest, I did the inverse. I knew a couple people at this university, so I talked to them and drilled them about every aspect of the university, the HR department, the IT department, everything I could, looked up all of the people involved online, so I knew as much as I could about who I was writing to. And that's another point. It should be addressed to somebody specific rather than to whom it may concern. But I made sure that everything I was talking about was appropriate to who I was talking about. And yes, some of it is guessing, but this is where you are talking. And if there's anything about your resume or cover letter that you should have somebody look over to make sure that it is grammatically correct, and you know the spelling is right and it flows well, have other people read it. Oh my goodness, the cover letter is your interview. To be honest, that is your first interview with whomever is reading it, is that cover letter. It should be personable. It should sound professional. They should feel like you are talking to them. They don't want to read bullet points in the cover letter. Again, this is your first interview opportunity without even being there. So again, it's just vital, and have other people read it, read over it yourself. I just can't stress enough the importance of that cover letter for the specific job and the specific place that you're applying for.
Absolutely. And here's something for some of you guys that might be, this goes both ways, by the way. When people are trying to apply for jobs here in Canada and the United States and things like that, and maybe English is your second language, it's not your primary language. I know English is one of those freakishly hard grammatical languages to learn. So my recommendation is, I know that you know at least somebody. And even if, and this is kind of interesting, if you go down to your local community college, you are going to find some English majors. English majors are, in the term we use, grammatical Nazis. They want everything, if you use the Oxford comma or not, those kind of things. Well, good news is you can say, look, this is what I'm trying to say. Can you help me write this? And by the way, I'll buy you, and they love this, a Starbucks gift card for $50. Hey, that might work. Might be worthwhile doing to make sure that your resume, like when I was actually sending something to some friends in Canada, they're actually from Montreal. Well, they're real big into Canadian French. I don't speak French, period. But I'm not going to use Google Translate to try to write a letter, as good as it is. In fact, I called my friend Jean-Luc Lajoie, and he's from Quebec City, and I said, this is what I'm trying to say. Can you write me the letter, and I'll send you a check in the mail? And he says, absolutely. He goes, no, I'll do it for free. So those are some things to think about. Make sure your cover letter, like Shawn said, is grammatically correct. You want to make sure it's also, as someone was asking, it needs to be specific to the job opportunity. All right, so we've talked a lot. Actually, I've talked a lot. Shawn's helped out a lot. And time for some questions. So, Anthony, we'll turn it back over to you to start handling that.
Okay, let's see. First question here. When reading a resume, which one do you feel is more important, experience or certifications? Shawn, I'm going to let you handle that one.
Boy, I think that experience is king in any situation. So I don't think it's an either or. I think that leaving either out would be a poor choice. So when I'm looking though, if I see somebody with certifications but they don't have any experience, or they haven't put any of that, what have you done for me lately stuff that Chris was talking about in there, I think that it just looks like they're trying to get by just on a bunch of letters, and that alone isn't enough. So both are important. I don't want to pick one over the other, but certainly don't leave off your abilities and your skills.
And just to add on to what Shawn said, remember what I said, relate the certification to your experience. And if you're just starting off, just recognize that you might be an MCSE, but if you've only had 2 years experience in the industry, you're probably still going to be starting in a help desk environment, probably. And even with virtual help desk now, that might be something where, hey, start off at a local volunteer organization and get that experience. That's the best way to take certification and make it work for you. Great question.
All right, our next question is, any suggestions on how to overcome applicant tracking systems? Chris, what do you think about that?
Well, the problem with these tracking systems, as many of you guys know, is they're pretty flawed. In fact, if you don't format it the right way, if you don't have the right keywords, the right phrases, things like that, you get a bad match. And so one of the things that you want to think about is find out for relevance. That really is the big thing. So when you click on, let's say I'm Mr. HR person or a recruiter, and I'm going to click on, I forget who it was that actually asked the question. I'll say Lewis because I saw Lewis's name on there. Let's say Lewis is applying, and they've ranked them as a good match, but the recruiter is going to also be looking for the resume that is submitted. And so what you want to do is want to make sure that everything that you know about in that environment is placed in the appropriate places. So the database fields that they're looking for on this are always going to be looking for the skill set first in the line item. And I'm not a database guy, and I mean, Shawn's much more into that. But anytime queries are run, you're going to get those first hits. So what you want to make sure is, from an objective standpoint, and the next thing that you say is make sure that you have the right words, titles, education. In other words, if I'm an IT administrator, and that's what the job is looking for, change some of the positions. As long as you are quote-unquote administrating something, use the word administrator, because I guarantee you that's what the query is going to be looking for. You also want to make sure that you're not, this is where, remember how we were talking about don't put pretty pictures and everything else? Tables and graphics throw the system off. Don't put any in there. And that's where you might, if you're doing an ATS, don't put your certification logo in, because it can cause some issues. And make sure that you use work experience. This is actually a friend of mine who's I think I mentioned her, Tammy. She's a recruiter, headhunter, and she says make sure you use the right term. The term that most ATS uses is work experience, not professional experience, not your career experience, not job experience. It's work experience. And so those are about the only tips that I have. I think another one that someone was talking about the other day was don't put the dates first. Put the dates later, because the system's not really interested in your dates. It's interested in, do you have the right keywords within that job, work experience. Hopefully that answered your question.
How many years back should be listed on your resume?
I'll take that one. How many years back? These feel like non-answers to me. So my answer is as many years back as is appropriate for the job. I think rather than how many years back, look at the job experience or the education and say, okay, what is going to make a difference in this particular job? For example, I didn't put on my resume, I didn't put high school experience because having college experience and college stuff kind of implied that I had that, so I didn't need to put that. I also went to a community college for a couple of years, but I didn't put that because it didn't seem as though it would improve anybody in their eyes. It wouldn't improve me in the eyes of somebody looking at it. So I guess pick the things that make you look better than things that would make you look not better.
It looks like there's a lot of other great questions that come in for us, and apologize that we have only a certain amount of time for them. But just want to recommend, Anthony, and I hope I'm not overstepping bounds, but if you go out on CBT Nuggets and you notice that we have communities that you can do and study, and I'm going to actually post to you guys my Twitter handle. And if you guys want to send any pictures, or not pictures, sorry, I just saw Alexis asking, should you put a picture of yourself on the ID? I do not, unless you are applying to be a cover model or something like that. I don't think it is necessary, and it can actually come back and bite you. People are biased, either good or bad, about how people look. If you are, and I say this because just out of experience, if you are female and you put your picture on there, if you're attractive, some people think you're trying to use your attractiveness to get a job, but yet you're not. And yet somebody who's maybe what society would call, or a culture would call, less than attractive, people would say, oh, we don't want to hire that person because they're not as attractive. And so it's just not something you really want to get into. If they want a picture of you for the job, that's usually something you can send over as a separate file, because you can usually say, do you want a headshot? I have a headshot, a professional. And by the way, go get a professional headshot. Please do not take your iPhone and take a selfie and send it in, because that will be one good way to have them go, yeah, they're not taking it seriously. Okay. All right, well, Anthony, we'll let you close it out. Sorry if you missed that. And thank you to everybody, by the way. Shawn, thanks for helping out on this.
Thank you for letting me.
Hey guys, thanks so much. Chris and Shawn, thanks again. That was great. Just want to remind everyone once again that we're going to be posting the recording on our blog at blog.cbtnuggets.com. Thanks so much for spending some time with us, and I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your week.